Christina, did you get my email from earlier today?
Today? That you sent it this morning? No, let me check now. Okay, got it now.
Yep.
Morning, Christina.
Good morning, everyone. We'll just give it a couple more minutes for other board members to dial in.
Christina, if you were saying something, I didn't hear you because you were muted. You don't, yeah.
I said exactly what
Oh, okay.
Rigor said. I'm texting a few board members to make sure. Thanks for that.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Joanne.
Christina, any response from other board members?
Not yet, no. We do have board member Ledger on the call. That's two, but yeah, I am texting, calling. Still nothing.
Okay. We'll give it another minute. All right. It's 8:35. In the interest of time, I think we should get started. Christina, let's just make sure that we communicate out to the full board that this meeting is being live streamed and they could review it at their convenience when they get a chance, and also that several of these topics will be up for discussion during our next board meeting. So, with that being said, welcome to today's Committee of the Whole May 13th meeting. We do have a full agenda, and first item up for discussion would be contract continuation approval, Open Architects.
And we have Deputy Superintendent Paul Foster on the call for this.
Take it away, Deputy Foster.
All right, thank you. Good morning. This is a contract renewal. So this is a contract we brought before you last year. And you can see on the screen some of the details. I'm going to move relatively quickly through the details of the contract because it is a renewal. And then I will give you a quick overview of the beta version of our dashboards. And so this is to renew for this coming year, so July 1 through June 30 of next year. The contract amount is $141,780. It's general fund dollars. And the purpose, this is what we had talked about last year with this contract, is endeavoring. We have had over the years multiple platforms that have housed different aspects of our data for the Hartford Public Schools. And the goal ultimately with Open Architects is to have one place where staff can go and access data on really across all the topics for which we collect data. So we obviously still have software systems like PowerSchool where we take attendance or Performance Matters or other platforms where students take assessments. But we want to ultimately take all that data from those source systems and put it in one place so we can really amplify our ability to plan from and act in response to data and really triangulate across multiple data sources. So you see the objectives here. This is aligned with 3 of our 4. Data cuts across everything. You could say it's aligned to 4 of our 4 district model for excellence priorities. And Christina, if you scroll down a little, I'll speak to the measures briefly.
Sorry, my screen just froze, or my mouse did.
No worries. Just to the top of the next page.
Jeez Louise. Of course, this is what happens. Apologies. Okay, here we go.
So you can see there some of the measures right now are really around getting the data out. So having role-specific dashboard views for school and district leaders, as well as other staff and the public by December 31st. So the dashboards I'm going to share with you are really our beta versions. We are using them, and I'll highlight some of the areas that they're already in use by our staff. And then the other thing I'll mention that was a big part of this last year, two things. One is we used multiple platforms to report data previously. This actually represents a cost savings over continuing to purchase multiple platforms. And so that's documented here, the potential cost savings. And the other piece is we have a relatively small team in our department, in our Office of Performance and Accountability, who are responsible for basically all of the software systems and all of the data within the Hartford Public Schools. And Open Architects is a software as a service model. And what that means is the Open Architects team is taking the data from our source systems, loading it in, and building the dashboards for us. So this year, obviously, we've been very involved in that work because we have to test it. We have to do the quality assurance and make sure that the data is matching what we see in our systems. But ultimately, that means that our staff in the Office of Performance Accountability are able to spend their time actually analyzing the data and making meaning of the data for staff in the district, as opposed to spending their time loading the data and building the dashboards. So I'm just going to pause there so that I can take a few minutes and just show you where we are with the beta dashboard, since again, this is a renewal contract. We do also have Seth Racine here, who is the leader of Open Architects. So when we get to questions, Seth can certainly speak to any questions you have for Open Architects as our vendor. So Christina, if you want to stop sharing, I'll share the beta dashboards.
Do me a favor and try to just start sharing. I think you'll be able to because my mouse is dead. I think that's the issue.
Deputy Foster, can you also speak to how we can leverage the dashboards for our continuous improvement processes and monitoring of progress?
Yes, sure. I might actually be able to most easily do that by showing you as I show you these dashboards. And so, right, when folks first sign in, and again, I'll highlight a couple dashboards that are already in use. So I'm saying this is beta, and I just want to emphasize the beta and that some of what you're seeing is in a draft form. But this is what folks see. And can you see my screen? Do folks see something that says our partner portal?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And so, right, when folks come in here, right, they sign in. When you go to my dashboards, these are the draft or the beta dashboards that are built thus far. So when you see SET walkthrough, SET is our school empowerment team process. That's actually learning walk data. And that's one of the dashboards that's been actively in use throughout this school year, where principals and central office staff prior to a school empowerment team meeting are able to go in and examine learning walk data, and then to facilitate the conversations about what's working, what are the opportunities for improvement, attendance, enrollment. If I scroll down, student behavior, there's a daily student trend dashboard. The idea there is, and this speaks a little bit to what the superintendent was talking about in terms of our continuous improvement, even just for a school principal to pull up their daily student trends and see attendance, chronic absenteeism, suspensions, entries, right? So students coming and going, enrollment and unenrollment, just quick data that they can respond to on a day-to-day basis. And then you also see some of the bigger picture items like our SBAC data, which speaks to our high-level goals as a district. We also have financial data loading from Munis, so general fund monitoring, purchasing, vendor lookup. Our interim assessments are captured here. College Board, where we capture our SAT and PSAT scores, staff evaluations, our culture and climate survey, which is data that the survey was done just in the last, I want to say 2 months. Hiring data we're still working through, student grades, teacher licensure. The other thing I want to highlight is school board summary. So one of the things we talked about when we presented Open Architects to you a year ago and first implemented the contract was that part of what this will allow us to do is increase our transparency with data. And so one way is by making sure that you as the board have your own dashboard that gives you a high level view of the most recent data. It is also our intention and our goal that in the coming year, we will release a public facing version of the dashboard on the website. So folks going to the Hartford Public Schools website will be able to see something. It may not look like the school board summary, but they're going to be able to see a high level summary of our current data. And so I'm just going to go through a couple of these. This is our student attendance dashboard. So this is live data that's current as of this data reflects through this past Friday. And you can see a trend in the comparison from last school year to this school year in terms of where we are with our attendance. You can see the heat map relative to attendance by grade and by school. I don't want to go through all of these in detail, but just want to give you a sense of what this is going to provide for us. This is an example of the assessment data. So this is the SBAC Explorer and the NGSS Explorer, where you can see levels of proficiency. You can see comparisons between schools, comparing both scaled score and growth. I mentioned our climate survey data. And so again, by school, how many students responded. This is the student data from our climate survey. And then you can drill through and you can see individual survey responses. So lastly, and I'll pause here for a moment, this is our school board summary. And so this is an opportunity for you as a board to examine data that, again, is relatively, it depends on the data, right? So obviously SBAC only updates once a year because our students only take SBAC once a year. Attendance is current as of the day before. Behaviors are current as of the day before. Climate survey and college board obviously are periodic, usually once a year. But you also, with all of these, you can then filter down and you can pick one school, or you could filter to a grade level. You could filter by gender, by EL status. And so that's a high level. And what I'll say on the board summary too, just for your awareness, we will send you an email this week to get you set up. So all members of the board can start accessing the board dashboard. So that's ready for you to start using. We just wanted to have this conversation before we kind of sent you that email and shared the credentials. So you'll get an email where you can set up a password so that you can go in and start accessing the dashboards. And so really going back to the superintendent's question about how are we using this for continuous improvement. So, right, our ability to continuously improve and to measure our progress against the goals we've set out depends on our ability to access timely data and also to look across data sets, right? If we just look at one piece of data, we can come to a misleading conclusion. And so I think the value in this dashboard is having data across different source systems in one place so we can really answer in real time critical why questions. So why are we seeing, if we're seeing an uptick in chronic absenteeism, being able to drill down more deeply and understand, well, is that across all students? Is it across a particular subgroup of students or a particular grade level of students? And so being able to drill in quickly and understand and answer more of those why questions that get at root causes is going to empower us to go deeper with our continuous improvement work. So I think I should stop there. That was a lot. And answer any questions. And again, Seth Racine is here if there's any questions for Open Architects.
Yep. So this is Phil. I guess my initial question is, and I think I heard you, this will be live for the board as of today?
We'll send you an email this week. So it's a two-step. We're going to send you an email with sort of an overview and directions. And then you're actually going to get an automated email from Open Architects with a link so you can create your password.
Okay. So, I think it's no mystery to folks. The board will be changing here in the next couple of weeks. I would just make sure that that email communication that goes out is also sent out again come, I guess, early June.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I know AJ has joined, and I'm trying to see.
Good morning.
Good morning. I guess my only other question would be, as you think about the data, what are some of the challenges that we're still experiencing, right? Like I understand the views are nice and so forth, but with data, it's always perception is reality type of thing. So just curious as to what are some of the obstacles that you're still trying to achieve in getting these views and dashboards and so forth.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. I would say the big one is just, we're pulling data from multiple source systems, and we have to make sure that ultimately what gets represented in the dashboard is accurate. And so we've been, I said these are beta, and that's very intentional because we're doing a lot of quality assurance, right? For example, chronic absenteeism, right? The way in which we calculate chronic absenteeism, not only in Hartford, but in Connecticut, right? There's a very specific set of which students are included and excluded from that calculation. And so that's just one example of just working closely with open architects to make sure that, you know, they're getting a big flat file with a whole bunch of rows of data, making sure what comes out in the visual is actually accurate. I think that's the biggest piece of work that, and we're doing that kind of piece by piece. So as we release dashboards, for example, to our principals, right, we're not releasing them to our principals until we feel like we're able to check all the boxes, that it is accurately representing the data that's coming from our source system.
Can I also expand on that while we're talking about the data and the tools, there's a whole other system that has to also be improved, and that is just the practice of what do you do with the data? What are the questions? What is the time that we have to set aside for our educators to come together, unpack the data? And so, yes, this is a part of a system that we want to make sure that we reduce the variance in practice across our schools. And so it's both technical aspects of the work and then the change in the mindset and the behaviors and ultimately, right, practice of the adults as well.
Okay. AJ, do you have any questions?
No questions at the moment.
Okay. Next item that we have for discussion is approval for E-rate.
Yes, and we have Joel Figueroa from MHIS on the call.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay, so the E-rate program. The E-rate program is an arm of the FCC's Universal Services Fund for schools and libraries. That was created to basically make technology, broadband access more affordable for the general public. The Schools and Libraries program was made with schools and libraries in mind. We're using the community the eligibility provision. The community eligibility provision, where free and reduced lunch counts can determine the amount of percentage discounted and covered by the government, and we would be responsible for the other half. So Christina, if you can go to the next slide. So the discount can range from 20 to 90%. And because of our number, we're actually on the upper end of that, where we actually get about 88% on average of technology discount from the government. And this allows us to really leverage a limited budget to, increase our technology spend that will support the entire district as a whole. So if we can go to the next slide. So the upcoming E-rate year application will cover our internet access and our fiber interconnection between the school buildings, and network equipment that will be scattered throughout a few of the schools throughout the district. If we're awarded, our share of the E-rate program will be covered through MHIS budget funds, so there will be no additional funding required. So that's already been included in our budget submission. So if this is a breakdown, it's broken down into two categories, Category 1 and Category 2. Category 1 is more of the telecommunications aspect, where it's broadband access, internet, interconnections that allow the network to run. And then Category 2, which are more of equipment spend, things like wireless, switching, routing, the equipment that actually runs and lights up the fiber and internet and brings them to the schools. This year, our total requested spend is $1,139,000, so just under $1,140,000. The E-rate reimbursement, which would be what the government will be covering, is 998,000 of it, bringing our contribution amount to 141,000. So for $141,000 in spend, we get just over $1 million of effective budget. And that's my presentation.
Can you go back a slide? And thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
What's the rationale between regarding the 88% reimbursement rate?
So that's based upon the community eligibility provision, which is the free and reduced lunch count of the student population. So that's just solely based on that. You know, the government has a formula that we give them. Food Services sends us those numbers, we send it off to them, and then they figure out what our percentage is. So our category 1 reimbursement rate is a full 90%, which is great because that's our biggest ongoing spend in the internet service that we have through CEN, and the fiber infrastructure that we have in between all the school buildings that interconnect and create the network that we run on. So yeah, the effective reimbursement rate is 88%.
So I guess let me ask that a different way. Is there any way for us to potential to get a greater reimbursement rate, or is that set?
90% is the maximum. So our category 1 spend is at max, and 85% is just they prioritize category 1 a little higher, and then category 2 is slightly lower. So if our free and reduced lunch count increases, that might bump the category 2 spend a little more, but that's really how it's calculated through free and reduced lunch. So I don't think there's much we can do to increase that outside of, you know, you don't want that, but basically the poverty level increasing. You know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I have no questions. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess a question for Leslie and Paul, is this amount already accounted for in our general budget for the next academic year?
It's already in MHIS's budget submission, so it's already included in our budget.
Okay.
So there's no additional funding, no necessary. We've already factored it in and submitted it.
Okay. Awesome. Makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just looking at the screen to see if others have joined. It doesn't look like it, and we can move on to the next agenda item, which I believe is first reading policy 5157, suicide prevention and intervention.
Yes, AJ, I don't know if you want to start by saying anything. If not, we have Joanne Tremblay Jackson on the call.
No, just want to just thank her for her due diligence and looking at this, and she has some other stuff that will be coming up later on for the board. But this policy seems just like an update for the I guess that the federal would like us to look at, and so I'll hand it over to her so she can just give the details of this policy.
And Joelle, thank you. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
So it's the State Department of Education that and the state that updated a statute requesting that we update our suicide policy and procedures to include using the suicide scale, which we've been using the Columbia scale all along. The policy itself does not need much revision except to say that it is a mental health professional in the school that does the review of anyone who might be at risk. The procedures that go with it, or our regulations, are again referring to the mental health professional, which would include school social worker, school psychologist, school counselor, as well as making it specific that we do use the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale when we're doing our risk assessments. That had been given to all of our social workers and the persons who do this as a rule, but now we're specifically making note of it in our regulations, and will ensure that it's part of the risk assessment document that everybody completes. And then at the bottom, we did a little bit more specifics in regards to when we do the training for everyone at the schools about who to contact if a risk assessment is required. And then also when we do the training to refresh everybody's memory about how to properly do a risk assessment.
Okay. And again, just for public consumption, this puts us in compliance with, I think you mentioned earlier, with federal language. Did I hear that correctly?
Right, for the state regulations, the state statutes and
Sorry,
regulations around risk assessments, which dovetail with the federal regulations, but it's the state that requested it and sent us the document, ensuring that we updated our policy to include this.
Now, do you know if they sent that just to us, or was that sent out broadly to?
No, it's sent out to all superintendents across the entire state.
Okay.
And then because I'm the person who deals with this most often, then I was then given that document to work from.
Yep. I appreciate it. I think this is, again, fairly straightforward, and more importantly, thank you for making sure that we're in compliance as it relates to state mandate. That's always critical for us as a school district of our size. Wanted to see if Ms. Board Member Johnson has any questions.
No questions. I mean, because we had a policy call last week, and Ms. Joanne did a phenomenal job explaining it. And this is, for public consumption, for those that will be watching this, there'll be policies that will come down that need review and need changing. And I think this is just one of those moments. Just for historical context, with CAVE, we did an audit similar to this all of last year, just updating and refreshing the numbers on our policies and some language. So we haven't had one in a while. So this is what this is. So this is not too unfamiliar to, just process of how we process information that's being passed down. And want to thank Ms. Joanne for just stepping in and getting a deeper understanding and sharing.
Awesome. Superintendent, do you have a question?
No, but Chairman, after this policy we're done talking about, I just want to take a minute to acknowledge Joanne and her team for some work that has been done. So I'll wait for the appropriate time.
Well, I would say this is the appropriate time.
Thank you. Just want to highlight for everyone that Joanne is at the center whenever we do have a crisis that we have to respond to as a system. And so as many of you know, we did have to mobilize our crisis response at the beginning of the week, given that we lost 2 of our students. And so Joanne is again at the center of all of that work, collaborating with many of us here on this call and our school leaders. And so just wanted to say thank you, highlight the great work. It is not work that we want to do. We don't want to have to respond to crisis, but when we do, know that Joanne and her team and all of us do it with the utmost excellence to make sure that our staff, our students, and our families are supported. So just taking a pause to say thank you to Joanne and the rest of our support team.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
And I just want to echo the superintendent's comments. On behalf of the board, we certainly thank you again. We understand the complexity and the experiences that many of our students go through, and the fact that they do have someone within central office that's empathetic and understands what they're going through is extremely beneficial for the district and the community. Again, Joanne, I hope one day that you're not doing this work, right? And I think that's the goal here. I think you're probably one of the few positions within the district that we hope that you don't have to do. But nonetheless, thank you.
Thank you. And that is what we all hope, that, obviously we work on prevention as much as humanly possible, and trying to, create situations and communities within all of our schools where there's enough support and everyone feels valued and heard, so that we don't end up having to do the type of crisis response that we had to do last week.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next item, which I believe is financial results update. Mr. Foster, I believe you're up.
Yes, good morning again. So you have the financial report through the end of February, so that's period 8 for us in the fiscal year. I'll just hit the high points for you. We did see a pretty big increase from the end of January, about 61 million, and it was a $67 million increase from the same time frame a year ago. That's largely the high level of spending in February is largely because of $38 million in tuition payments issued in the month, which is actually a good news story in the sense that we've worked closely, particularly with CREC, to try to get some of our tuition payments processed earlier in the year, because we struggled some last summer with tuition bills coming in late, even after the close of the fiscal year. And so we've been accelerating that. So that shows up in the February reports in terms of a big bump in the spending. Across the general fund, our non-certified severance is up relative, or it's over budget, I should say. That's a pretty small line item in our budget. And our certified severance is actually below our budgeted amount, so we're not super concerned. Fringe benefit costs are something we've been watching because they had been trending over budget, but they actually came down a little bit in February. The one main risk factor for our budget for the 23-24 school year remains tuition, because our tuition billing is coming in higher pretty much across the board than what we had budgeted for the 23-24 year. We're paying close attention to that, and we're looking at, I think we've talked in previous financial updates about some of the steps we've taken in terms of doing some sweeps of budgets. We also did a modest hiring freeze, I would say, in non-classroom positions, just to make sure we're preserving funding to cover any potential deficit. If you move to then, and attached to this, of course, is the all funds, general funds, and special funds year-to-date reports. And then if we move to the ESSER, I just want to highlight where we are with our COVID relief grant spending. And so we are at about 77.4% spent. I'm sorry, and that's end of February, right? So that's a little while ago on our ESSER 3 ARP money. And we are at the end of February, we were 85.6% spent across all of our COVID relief dollars. So I'm mindful of a narrative that's been out there of us not expending our COVID relief dollars. It's just not true. And actually, if you look at national data, Connecticut school districts, I'm sorry, not national, state data, this is in the paragraph underneath the chart. Connecticut districts were about 56% of the way through their ESSER 3 ARP funding and 71% of the way through all their COVID relief dollars at the same time, kind of through the end of February. So that's 56% and 71% for Connecticut districts on average, compared to 77% and 86% in Hartford. So we have been consistently well ahead of the average pace in Connecticut, spending down our dollars. And just to dwell on that for one moment, you see that big number of $22 million remaining at the end of February. I know I've said this before, but for the viewing public, I want to be really clear. We do not encumber salary. And what that means is in that column that says total spent and encumbered, 76 million. That includes, intent to purchase goods and services. That's what it means when we encumber the funds and we haven't paid the bill yet. What it does not include is the fact that we have a number of positions that we've funded on ARP and ESSER 3, and we don't set aside the money in advance to pay those salaries, and those salaries get paid through the end of August for teaching, particularly 10-month teaching positions that are funded on COVID relief dollars. We have 4 payrolls in the summer that round out their pay for the year. And so that 22 million remaining, in that 22 million is the remaining salary costs for staff who are funded on COVID relief dollars. So I say that to say there is no doubt that by the September 30th, 2024 deadline, we will have expended our COVID relief funding. And you know, we have again consistently been ahead of the pace of the rest of Connecticut. There's an irony, of course, knowing our budget next year, it would have been helpful to have more of it left, but we follow the directives we received from the federal government and the state government to use the money, to be strategic with the money, and we did that. We made strategic investments, as you all know. You all as a board made strategic investments with our COVID relief dollars. And so that has the consequence that we don't have a lot left as we enter the next fiscal year, but that's because we've been strategic and intentional as directed by the state and federal government.
And as directed by the board, I would say as well, right?
Yes,
There were many a times in which the board was very explicit to us as to making sure that we leveraged all of the resources available for our students, staff, and community.
Yeah, well, the one thing I want to say here that I think is often forgotten when we're talking about the COVID relief funds, while this is certainly was a one-time and hopefully would never happen again, at least for me, from my perspective, one of the things, and I've asked this before a number of times, like, what is the right number? Like, what is the right budget size for our district? And even with, right, the $50 million per year that we receive, I'm of the mindset that that's still falling short. Now, could there be some improvements and efficiencies gained here or there? Absolutely. But does that solve all the challenges that our teachers, our staff, and our students and our parents face, not only as a district, but also as a community? I would argue that it's not enough. And Superintendent, I remember having this conversation with you, is like, look, like, we have to spend down this money, and we have to spend it smart and very efficiently, because one of the worst things that you could do is get the money, not spend it, and still be in a hole. At the very least, we could say, look, we spent the money the best way we can. We spent it with transparency. We held people accountable, and that still is not enough. So again, from my vantage point, I hope that future discussions around what I would call right-sizing the district from a financial perspective happens, and that there is a realization that even with these funds, that there were still challenges. And again, I think folks also need to recognize that those funds were earmarked for very specific things, all right? And some of the challenges that we see, these funds doesn't necessarily address all of them. AJ, I'm not sure if you have any questions or comments that you like to add.
No, I mean, I think everything that you said is accurate and spot on. You know, the most frustrating part about this is that we certainly have these conversations in this space, but you know, rarely ever gets reported properly out to the community on how we, you know, how we manage these funds, right? And so I would say, as a step forward, as we expect change, making sure that we communicate these things the best way we can. And I think we've done a phenomenal job. The superintendent, like, we started this back in October, right? So let's not forget that. But however, we always want to close the communication gap and make sure that we're communicating the funds that we get in a proper way. I mean, we as you said, Chairman, we were already mitigating an already exhaustive budget. And for the new folks like Ms. Ratley, who's come, and you know, some other folks who've joined in the last couple of years, I mean, you've seen firsthand and worked firsthand on seeing this through. So it not to say it is what it is, but it's challenging when you only have a certain amount to budget and you're trying to cover all the needs of our population. So just wanted to throw that communication piece back out there. That will always be a thing that I speak about, is how I mean, there's never enough communication, so everyone gets on board and understands where we are. Thank you, Mr. Reagan.
Thank you.
But that is a reflection for us, right? I think we've done a good job communicating, and right, there's always someone, a constituency, that either hasn't followed the entire process and is kind of missing a piece of it. But we did not just start this in October. We started in October relative to the budget for the next year. We started the work in collaboration with our stakeholders when we first heard that we were receiving ESSER funds. Even before we knew how much money we were going to get, we started thinking about the process to have it be inclusive and have voice and continue to have the feedback loop. So yes, there's always room for improvement, but I also want to remind us all that it wasn't just October. It was October, but way before, right? As to how are we going to prioritize? What are the must wins? All of that. I know that 3 years have gone by, but we've done more than just communicate about the budget since October. So I just want to give us a little more credit than that. Not that you weren't giving us the credit, AJ, but
Yeah, no, I got you. It's fair.
Yeah.
And thank you for lifting that.
yeah.
I see Miss Brody has joined, and I just want to pause to see if she has any questions or comments as it relates to the financial updates.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. No, I think it was well covered, and the points that all of you made were valid, especially along the lines of folks coming in at engaging us on this process at different points and not seeing and understanding the full picture. But it was well covered.
Thank you. Christine, I think we could go to the next topic, which is, I believe, the School Governance Council report.
Yeah, well, that was it for discussion items. We always do include these monthly reports for the board and public consumption. But since we are very early for once, I see Chief Blackburk on the call. I don't see Ms. Alvarado, who is normally the one who reviews it. But real quick, I also want to remind the board that this next workshop, June 4th, is in person. It's the SGC annual showcase that will include the end of year welcome center and SGC data report, as well as live SGC people, panels and everything. June 4th at Capital Community College in person, this workshop. So let me just, I don't know, Chief Blackburk, are you able to, you want me to just screen share?
Sure, you can screen share if there are any questions, because as you shared, it is for consumption, but feel free to screen share, Christina.
I guess kind of walk us through here what we're viewing.
Absolutely. So this is just a copy of Ms. Alvarado's report that she has usually presented to the Family and Community Engagement Committee. And this just shows a breakdown of the school governance councils, who are, the green stands for schools that are fully seated. The yellow bands are for schools that are partially seated, meaning that they have either a majority of parents and or teachers, and the breakdown is listed in the columns: parents, teachers, community members. And then the governance councils that are in the red band means that they are not in compliance, meaning that they do not have their council fully seated or a number of vacancies. So you can see that we do have 2 schools that have a number of vacancies on their SGCs.
So question, and thank you for that. So clearly the red, right, are problematic in this too, but what actually draws my attention is the yellow, where we have a fair amount of yellow. All right, and when I look at yellow, those could easily turn red at some point. I guess my question is, what are we doing as a team to make sure that this could be more green? Right, when I look at like the first 3, right, you have Annie Fisher, Potensis, Breakthrough, Buckley. Like, how can we get more greens on this, I guess is what I'm saying. Like what do we need to do based on your experience? But then also I see something on out of Montessori at Bachelor 8. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure if people are seeing it. So
Yeah, no, I was wondering the same thing. I think it's right underneath Montessori Batchelder. I will find out from Ms. Alvarado.
Yes, and that may be a formatting error. It may have inadvertently put an 8 there versus the school that should be there. But to answer your question, Mr. Chairman, that yes, so in looking at all of the yellow schools, there's constant engagement from Ms. Alvarado and the FCSSPs, the principals, to actively, continuously recruit for membership to SGCs, understanding that from time to time, families may leave a school. So if they're sitting on an SGC, they'll have to resign their position, trying to work with teachers to fill those positions, but actively, constantly, she's always trying to work to get SGCs to be in that green band. And more than likely, what we tend to see throughout a school year is more schools moving from yellow to green. Very rarely we see schools moving from yellow to the red, but it's a valid question, and it's just active engagement working to recruit members for the SGC.
And it seems like that should be Annie Fisher at Montessori if we're following Montessori at Annie Fisher.
Okay.
The number 8. I think it was a typo.
Because Annie Fisher Montessori is up at the top, but we'll definitely send an updated report to the board and ask Ms. Alvarado as to what happened there. But I do think that's just a formatting error.
Okay. I'm sorry, Board Member Brody, Board Member Johnson, do you two have any questions?
I do.
Yep.
Thank you. So for the sake of reporting, and we've gone back and forth with this for many years now, per the statute, I don't believe there's only 2 things. You're either in compliance or you're not in compliance. So if you see green, they're in compliance. If you don't see green, they're not in compliance. So I think we just need to, like, this is good graphically, so we can see schools are maybe short a couple members and they're emerging, they're going to be in the green, but you're either in compliance or you're not. And I just wanted to make that statement.
That's actually a great point, Ms. Brody, and something that I actually did not think about, but it was certainly centered around my concern with all the yellows. So with that comment, right, when I take a look at this.
Okay, you up. Sorry. You might want to get out of that. It kicked her out of her internet. So.
Okay. I'm sorry. I missed.
You might want to mute.
I do apologize.
She basically stated that you know the green, you're either in compliance, and if you're not green, you're out of compliance, even if it's yellow versus red.
Correct. So if with that being the case, then I'm seeing roughly 21 schools that pose some type of, that could potentially pose an issue. Right. If I'm looking at this right, there's 17 that are green, 19 that are yellow, 2 that are red. And again, based on Ms. Brody's comments, I'm focusing on the yellow and the red. That's 21, and I would say that's right, more than half. So I think it's just something to call out. Like, again, I think this is a good view. This gives us a good barometer. I would just encourage the team to, next time they report on this, to figure out how we can have more greens on this sheet, on this report. And then more importantly, what steps do we need to take to make that happen?
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I apologize, Ms. Brody, I got kicked out. But yes, so as Ms. Brody restated, as a district, we have implemented the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, the green, the yellow, and the red. And so, yes, we want all of our SGCs to be in the green. And in prior years, as I mentioned in my earlier comment, that may happen, and constantly working towards that. So yes, the statute does speak to being in compliance or out of compliance, but also you are able to operate your SGC in yellow status based on the number of seats that are filled. So we can denote the strategies used for engagement to fill the SGCs, as we've always done. I know this is our first time looking at this report in a few months, based on the committee of the whole structure, but happy to do that. So Ms. Santiago, what I'm hearing is that I owe you an updated piece here, trying to figure out what the A is, as well as denoting what the strategies have been. And I think those are the two pieces that I owe you.
Okay,
Okay.
sounds good. And don't go anywhere.
I
So
know.
next.
Well, before we,
Oh.
Board Member Johnson, do you have any questions?
No, I mean, and I'm sure all of us do as board members have had a moment or a time being asked to be a part of SGCs and PTOs. And, you know, I personally know that getting a full slate of folks is very, very challenging. I mean, you mainly get your teachers and maybe a few parents, and you might be able to, you know, coerce a few community members to be a part. But this is definitely a challenge. Some schools do it well, some don't. So I'm not necessarily surprised at this, knowing what it takes to get folks to show up to extra meetings and so forth and so on. So I just want to encourage us to be, you know, to be diligent to turn these colors around. Thank you.
All right. With that being said, let's move to the next agenda item, which is 3.2, Welcome Center report.
Okay, and if you may or may not know, Ms. Judith Fagan, who normally does this report, has recently retired. In fact, her retirement party was just this past Friday. So, Chief Blackburn.
Sure. And so the Welcome Center report, this is the summary for April. And looking at it, try not to read through intentionally, but 263 intakes, meaning that we've addressed requests, concerns, complaints that come in. Also, the top 10 reasons for the intakes are listed. Also, the top 5 schools where we receive the requests, the concerns, and or complaints, and understanding that the complaints, the concerns, or the requests that are coming in, this information is also shared with our principal supervisors so they can take that information back to schools, and what needs to be addressed can be addressed. Also want to share that we list out our McKinney-Vento students. So those are our students who are either homeless and or displaced. And for the month of April, we did not receive any donations into the Welcome Center. So those donations can consist of school supplies, clothing, hygiene products. So that is the summary of the Welcome Center report. I just don't want to read line by line what's here, but feel free to share any questions that may come up from what's here.
Board Member Johnson, Board Member Brody, do you have any questions?
Not questions,
okay.
but comments.
Sure.
Just really quickly, Ms. Santiago, the last board outing that we had to hear community members, there were a couple concerns that came up in the community regarding the Welcome Center, and I just want to make sure that information at least is in the purview of Chief Blackburn, just so it's on the table. So, I mean, we don't have to go through those concerns at this moment, but just since we're on this report, we did hear some, a few things at the board talkbacks that we had that I think should be shared. So I'll leave that there and hope that those things are resolved or, can be looked at some point in time.
Oh, and well, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you Board Member Johnson, no, we were not aware. That information did not come back to us. So we'll lean on you, Christina, to share that with us. Because I do think it's important that whatever was shared does come back so we can address it and ensure that, you know, if there's a discrepancy, something that needs to be addressed, we can address it.
Fair, thank you.
Chairman Rigor, I don't know if you wanted to go through. There's two that I remember.
Well, I want to see if Ms. Brody has a question before.
I don't. Thank
Okay.
you.
Christina, what were you, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, I think the main one was that they were concerned that there was only one staff person behind the desk at the Welcome Center with a room full of visitors. But I think the talk then turned because at the next breath was like central office has too many employees. So we were trying to tell the community you can't have it both ways. So central office needs staff like in the Welcome Center if to staff them. And the other was parking validation, which I think I don't know that that's your area. It's probably a operations thing and funding that they were concerned that the parents who came to visit the Welcome Center did not get their parking validated.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chair?
Sure. Yes, please.
Thank you. So I'll deal with the first one. So in our Welcome Center, and as you know, the Welcome Center is housed by Welcome Center staff as well as the Office of Enrollment and School Choice. And so we actually went for probably the majority of this school year without having a Welcome Center receptionist due to just a vacancy. And that has always been the structure of our Welcome Center is that there is a Welcome Center receptionist. We also have a school resource officer that assists. And so we have a wide waiting room on purpose. Of course, during pandemic, coming back from the pandemic, it was of utmost importance that we had space for folks to socially distance, items for families to come in, a play area for students. So that is our model, that we have a Welcome Center receptionist that does field what the request is that families are coming in for. And then from there, we have staff members that then assist the family with their need. If they need to see the Welcome Center coordinator or the homeless and displaced coordinator, or if they need to see a school enrollment specialist. So while there is one receptionist, they are working in tandem with the school resource officer and trying to determine who is best suited to serve that actual request. So the person is never in any danger. The Welcome Center does run, in my opinion, like a well-oiled machine because our families are able to come in and be serviced in real time. So do appreciate the concern, but that is the actual model. Of course, we'd be happy to have an additional receptionist or someone in the Welcome Center if there was funding for such a person, but that is the model, that there's a receptionist working in collaboration with the school resource officer just to maintain order. But our families, they do have plenty of space. There's access to lavatories, a play area for students. And sometimes it's just a question that they have and they may not need to see an additional staff member. I'm coming to you, Ms. Chief Davis Gooch. Thank you. And then in regards to validation of parking, before I tag Chief Davis Gooch in, I will share that being downtown has been a blessing. Like when we were at 960, as many of our families do take the bus into downtown to come to the Welcome Center. And families that do require validation, I will let Chief Davis Gooch address that. But just want to highlight that not all of our families are driving into the Welcome Center, but many of them have shared with us, through anecdotal conversation that they appreciate being able to come in via bus and be back downtown so they can access services in the Welcome Center. Chief Davis Gooch.
Good morning and thank you, Chief Blackburn. Definitely that is the case. As many of you know, we are in this space due to the Buckley School construction project. And so the majority of that cost is absorbed by the construction project. This year was going to be kind of like, let's watch and learn the needs of families just this first year. I actually have not heard many complaints around the parking. It's pretty affordable, and we do our best to make sure we move families quickly to the extent possible. Chief Blackburn, the only thing I would add about the Welcome Center protocol. So when families come in, there's actually an electronic log where everyone is able to see what the family is seated for. And so we do try to move very quickly.
Thank you. And Chief Davis-Gooch, thank you for lifting up the electronic log. I think that's something for the viewing public to also understand, that this is not just folks coming in and, like, you may forget. There is a formal process, a check-in process for each individual that does come into the Welcome Center, so that we can track what's happening and also be able to service them in real time.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. The one thing I would say around the Welcome Center, I think there is a difference between having the appropriate amount of staff in central office and also having the appropriate amount of people for the Welcome Center. So I don't want the narrative of saying, well, we're looking at reducing central office staff, which equates to our Welcome Center being understaffed. I think it's two separate things. I think you could actually achieve both, where you could have the Welcome Center appropriately staffed and still being very efficient at central office. I don't know what that balance is. That's something for, I guess, the superintendent and her team to figure out, right? But that is a concern that I know I've heard as well from the community, right, in terms of just making sure that the Welcome Center is staffed appropriately. And then the other thing around the parking, and I hear everything that being said in terms of folks taking the bus and so forth. To the extent that parking is able to be validated, I would say let's maybe have more of an effort to make that known to folks. I'm not sure if it is, if that is a possibility. But yeah, I mean, I think those are all valid concerns, and I think the team is certainly addressing them. What I've often found is that all the great work that you guys are doing, I would say just make sure you amplify it, communicate it more broadly so that folks know.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just one clarifying question. Is the concern from the community that the service that's being delivered is because of staffing not being appropriate? Because the model that's currently in place, Chief Davis-Gooch, I don't believe you have any vacancies on your side. I know I don't have any vacancies on my side for the Welcome Center. So I just want to make sure, as I talk with Deputy Ratley, talk with the superintendent, is the statement from the community that we are understaffed or we need to ramp up and add additional staff?
I will default here to Board Member Johnson, but my impression is that they're not getting the answers that they're looking for, right? So that could be two things. One, maybe it's an opportunity for retraining, right? The current staff. Again, I don't know. I'm just trying to, right? Like, or we're not staffed enough.
Yeah, the vibe, to answer that question, the vibe that I got from, or what I walked away from that conversation that we had in our community listening sessions was that when folks walked in the Welcome Center, it just seemed understaffed, right? And I mean that's a perspective point. That certainly may not be the case, but when you walk in and there's one person or no person. I can't tell you the situation. This was just a general conversation. That it didn't feel like it was, just someone in there. I can't give you the exact perspective that the person was coming from when they mentioned this. I just wanted to lift it just to make sure it's on our radar and that it's there. What I'm most concerned about, I mean, out of the two scenarios that were given, was the parking situation, because when residents do take capacity and come to our buildings and they drive and so forth, so on, parking shouldn't be a barrier, even though we both know and we all know it's downtown Hartford and it's going to be like that. But if a simple solution or suggestion may be some signage that when you walk in the Welcome Center, we validate, and if that's something you're already doing, great, but like, just to cover ourselves so no one walks in and has to guess what they have to do when they get there probably would be helpful. And again, I'm taking these conversations with a grain of salt because in the same breath, it's like defund central office, right? So, but there are, again, I take these conversations with a grain of salt and I look at the stuff that we can do and would be a hindrance or a hesitance to engaging. And so, I mean, parking is a big thing. So if there's just some signage or something that says, please be sure before you go validate, or in the garage, if you're here with HPS, please go to Welcome Center and talk to so forth and so on. That's me trying to figure out, but I'm sure you all have a solution to this. And just make it where it's visible. So when folks walk in, they don't have to guess what it is. And please make sure it's in English and in Spanish, as you all always do. But that's just one of those things that we hear.
Chief Davis Gooch.
Yes, I just want to be clear. At this time, we had not been validating. We wanted to take this first year to understand the demand because the validation would be at an increased cost to the district. And again, so I haven't received many complaints or concerns around the validation. And we were taking this year, so I'll actually ask my team to review the log to make sure to just count the touch points on that issue arising.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and I think again, as a community, we just have to be set in reality. So if folks in the community want to have parking validated at the Welcome Center, is going to come at a cost, right? I mean, I think we just need to be very clear upfront about that, and that's perfectly fine. But to the extent that, and you alluded to this, that you could do that research and do that due diligence to see if it warrants further conversation, I think it will be helpful.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you. And then through you, Mr. Chair, the last thing I'll share is that Board Member Johnson, our families, when they come to the Welcome Center, there is signage and the validation piece. Chief Davis Gooch and her team will look into that further, but just want to share again for the viewing public, there is signage. The building that we are in, even if they come in through another door, the team from Grunberg Management, they always direct and are very helpful. They direct families to the Welcome Center. So just want folks to know that there is signage in both English and Spanish directing families on where to go to the Welcome Center. And as far as the validation piece, more information to come on that based on Chief Davis Gooch's comment. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Chief Blackbird.
Okay. Seeing no other hands raised, I think that is the end of our agenda and actually concludes our meeting for today. So thank you everyone for your time and for your input. And I know there were a couple of takeaways that I think the team will track down. Other than that, I will see everyone at the next regular meeting.